So thank you for coming today. This is the OPT workshop, so the workshop for optional practical training. We're going to go through what OPT is, how you're eligible, application timing, some application tips, and how to avoid common mistakes that we see on the application. So to begin with, OPT, or optional practical training, is a work authorization type for F1 degree-seeking students to work in jobs related to their field of study for up to 12 months per education level. So for every degree level you're in, you're allowed 12 months of post-completion OPT. That means if you do 2 master's degrees, like an MBA and then an MS degree, you're still only allowed 12 months for total for both programs. All of the work that you do must be directly related to your field of study. So if you're studying public policy, you should be working in a job that's directly related to that field. We'll be discussing what directly related means in just a bit. OPT is not employer specific. This means you do not need a job offer to apply. You can have multiple employers or switch employers while you're on OPT. And again, if you're applying for OPT, you don't need a job offer. You don't need to wait until you have an offer. You can apply and then get a job later. So on your 12 months of OPT, you are allowed up to 90 days of unemployment. We'll talk about when the clock for this starts and how you calculate that. But in general, for that year, you are allowed to not have a job for up to 90 days. And that's sort of 90 individual days. So if it's 20 days here and then 10 days later, 20 more days in between jobs, it's 90 days total, you're allowed to be unemployed. There are 3 types of OPT. The 2 that we're mainly talking about today are pre-completion OPT and post-completion OPT. So the pre and post indicate that the OPT, the work authorization, is occurring either before the end of your program, so during your program, or after your program ends. And this is calculated based on your program end date on your I-20. So some of you might have end dates in the future. Maybe you're a PhD student and you were given an 8-year I-20 and you only need 7 years. So if this is the case, we will need to shorten your I-20 to reflect when your course registration, when your program ends. This may or may not be graduation. What it really is when the registration for your program ends. So anything that occurs after your program is post-completion OPT. Before your program is pre-completion OPT. You become eligible to apply for OPT after you finish 1 academic year or 3 quarters. That's the only joke in this whole presentation, so enjoy it. So you are eligible for OPT after 1 year of full-time enrollment. So as I mentioned before, you have to be employed while on OPT. You're allowed a limited set of unemployment days. So what's considered employment? Employment on OPT has to meet these 3 criteria. 1, as I mentioned, it has to be directly related to your major or field of study. So this means you're using the skills and knowledge you developed in your program in the job you're doing. If you received a degree in statistical analysis, if that's a degree, maybe it is. Yes, MSCA is statistical analysis. You don't necessarily have to have the job title analyst, but you do have to be using those skills in your job. The same as if you're an art history major. You don't necessarily have to have the job title art historian, but you still have to be using those skills and that knowledge you developed in that program in the job. You are the only person who's responsible for determining whether or not that job's directly related. You will need to report to the government and describe how it's directly related in about 2 sentences. We'll talk about that later. But so that's directly related. The second one is full-time employment while on OPT is considered 20 hours a week or more. And you can have multiple jobs. So all of your jobs have to combine for at least 20 hours a week. So if you have a 15-hour-a-week part-time job and a 5-hour-a-week internship, that's completely fine. They combine for 20 hours a week. The third one is it should be appropriate for your level of education. If you're receiving a master's degree or a bachelor's degree, you shouldn't be working in a job that only requires a high school diploma or has, qualification levels that are really far below what you would be expected to work. So essentially, you're not going to be working as a barista at Starbucks, but you might be working in their accounting department or something like that. You can have multiple employers, as I mentioned. This person's working for NPR, the Art Institute, and Morgan Stanley. You can decide what their job is, but again, they all have to be directly related to the field of study. You can be self-employed, so you can start your own business or consulting company. Again, this is just for immigration purposes, so the immigration law allows you to have your own business. This is completely separate from any business licenses you need to operate or other business registration. This is just for your immigration status. It's okay to start your own business or be self-employed. So if you do consulting work, you can certainly do that while on OPT. Next, unpaid internships. You are allowed to count unpaid internships as employment as long as they meet the other requirements. They're directly related. So if you're having trouble finding full-time employment or things to meet that 20-hour-a-week requirement, you can use an unpaid internship to meet that requirement. Our next section will talk a little bit about timing, when you can apply. So on your handout, you should also have this continuum at the bottom of the page. If you don't have a handout, they're in the back. Based on that end date we discussed earlier, so the I-20 end date, when you're going to finish your program, you can apply up to 90 days before and up to 60 days after that end date. So in the lighter blue segment of this chart. So that's the window in which USCIS will accept your application. If you get it there one day too early or one day too late, they will keep your application for 3 months, then reject it, and keep your money. So make sure that USCIS receives your application within that window. No earlier, no later. For those of you graduating in June, I have the specific dates for you a little later in the presentation. When you apply for OPT, you are required to put down a requested start date on your application. So this is the date that you want the OPT employment to begin, the date that will most likely be printed on the card that shows you're allowed to work on OPT. And when you're selecting that date, it has to be within the dark blue window. So in between your end date and 60 days after your end date. Now, it does take 90 days, so 3 months, for OPT to be approved. Unlike other immigration benefits, it's not approved by OIA, our office. It is approved by USCIS, so the government. So you send in your application. Once they receive it, it will take 3 months, so up to 90 days for it to be approved. So if you're graduating in June, and 90 days ahead of that end date will be right now, about March 12th or 13th. If you submit your application this week, you can expect that it will be approved by mid-June. So if you are graduating this June and wanting to work in June, if you haven't already, you need to apply for OPT ASAP. So the later you apply, anytime you apply, it will take 3 months to be approved. So if you apply here, you can expect it will be approved 3 months later. If you apply here, 3 months later. If you apply all the way at the end, here, it will still take 3 months. But because this is the latest start date you can have, you will likely lose some of your OPT time. Okay? So this is a little bit about when you need to apply. So as you're thinking about your post-completion OPT application, you'll want to apply about 90 days before you want to begin working. For pre-completion OPT, that is OPT that occurs before your program end date, you can apply up to 90 days before you start working. So if you want a summer internship and you're applying for OPT, it's supposed to start July 15th, then you would apply around April 15th. So moving on now to the OPT application. So how do you apply for OPT? It's a 2-step process. The first step is to get a recommendation from our office in the form of a new I-20, and the second is to combine a bunch of documents and send them to USCIS. So the first step, getting a new I-20 from OIA, you can either bring these documents in person to our front desk, or you can upload them on an online application form. You can do either. So the first set of information we will need is your application form. So this is your statement saying, I want to apply for OPT. You'll list any previous segments of OPT or CPT you've used. And CPT, just to say this, CPT has no impact on your OPT eligibility. So if you've used 3 months or 6 months of CPT in the past for a summer internship, that will not take away from your 12 months of OPT. The only time CPT would impact OPT is if you use more than 12 months of full-time CPT. And if you were in that case, you would already know it because we would have warned you long before you did that and talked about it. So unless you have 12 months of full-time CPT, it has no impact on your OPT. Really important on this form, this is where you'll indicate what you want your requested start date and end date to be. So you tell us what you want your start date and end date to be. And when you're filling it out, the end date's 1 day less than the start date if you're doing a year. So for example, June 3rd, 2017 to June 2nd, 2018. Okay. Again, this has to be in that 60-day window following your OPT end date. If you have any questions about it, feel free to consult with your international student advisor. Things to consider is there is a 90-day processing window that USCIS might take. Think about if you have a job, when your work start date might be. If you don't have a job offer, do you want a later start date to allow yourself more time to look for a job, or do you want an earlier start date to start working right away if someone hires you? So these are things to consider as you think about your start date. The next form is the verification of completion form. So this needs to be signed by your academic advisor, faculty advisor, or dean of students. What it essentially says is that you are going to finish your academic program in a specific quarter. So for example, in June or winter or summer. And it's just a confirmation that you will be done in a specific quarter. Again, signed at the bottom by your dean of students, faculty advisor, or academic advisor. And then the final piece that we need is the I-765. This is the actual application form for OPT that goes to USCIS. We proofread it for you. So this form is very weirdly specific in the way you need to fill it out. Please do not try to fill it out without reading the directions. So on our website, we have detailed line-by-line directions, an instructional video telling you how to fill it out line by line. Make sure to use those resources before attempting to fill this out. Some of the answers and some of what you have to fill in, it's unexpected and not always logical. So make sure to read the instructions first. The only part that I'm going to highlight from this form is the address section. This is extremely important because this is where we see by far the most issues with OPT. This address is where USCIS is going to send all information about your application. This is where they're going to send your receipt. This is where they're going to send your EAD. And if for some reason there are any questions about your application, you receive a request for evidence, something like that, it's all going to go to that address. So you need to make sure that you put an address down that's going to be valid for at least 3 to 4 months after you mail this in. So don't put an address down that you're leaving in June when your lease is up. You can send it to a friend or relative. For some reason, everyone always has an uncle in California, so you can, I assume some of you have uncles in California, so you can send it to your uncle in California. It's okay if this address is different from anything else with your immigration record. This is just for the purposes of this application. If you are going to send it to someone else, you do need to include a care of name. This person's having it sent to Wolfgang Mozart, which is interesting. But so you'll need to put the person's name on the application with the C/O, the care of. Instructions on how to do that are on our website as well. So pay attention to the address you are using on this form. It's very important. So it's a front and a back. Don't forget to sign it. Sometimes USCIS has this red thing that says don't forget to sign, but you cannot remove it from the box in order to sign your name. That's okay, just sign next to it if you absolutely can't get it to go away. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but there you go. Again, we have an instructional video of how to fill out this form on our website if you want to use that. So these 3 documents to OIA, again, either bring them to the front desk in person or upload them on the online form. Like all of our processing, it will take about 1 week for us to create the new I-20 for you. We will email you when it's ready to pick up, as we always do. You will be able to see on page 2 that your OPT has been requested on this I-20. And at the bottom, it will have, if you can see over here, the dates you requested. Here. If we have any questions about your OPT application or the dates you requested, we will contact you and say, what's going on here? So know that you want to get it to us about 1 week, at least 1 week before you want to mail it. Because of the high volume we receive this time of year, we really can't expedite anybody's step 1 of this, so make sure you're getting it to us about a week before you want it to be sent. We will also give you a copy of the I-765 back. We'll notate any errors or corrections or suggestions in red, so if there's red ink on your I-765, know that you need to redo it and get a new one. Next, we'll also give you screenshots of previously used OPT and CPT at the University of Chicago. We only have access to your current record, so if you've been to a different school before, that won't be reflected on here. It's only OPT and CPT at UChicago. Even if you've never used CPT, you will still get a CPT screenshot. It has to be included in the application. So you want to make a copy of all of those documents for your records, and then combine it with passport photos. These must be new passport photos, ones that have not been used in a previous application. I know you probably have a stack of old passport photos, but honestly, I've seen applications rejected because of duplicate passport photos. Just spend $12 at the Reg or Walgreens or CVS and get some new ones. Next, a personal check or money order in the amount of $410 to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Not US DHS, not United States DHS, US Department of Homeland Security, 410. Either is fine to use, your preference. The benefit of using a check is that you'll be able to see when they withdraw the money from your account, so that will be one way to tell once your application's received. Next, a paper copy of your I-94. So this is either, if you have an I-94 physical card still, a copy of that, or a printout from the I-94 website showing your most recent entry. It doesn't use your whole travel history, just your most recent entry showing you're in F1 status. Next, a copy of the bio page of your passport. So this is the only page that's needed. You don't and shouldn't include a copy of your visa or any other passport pages, just your biographical page with your face. And this is an optional form, but highly recommended, the G1145. This is a request that they notify you electronically, so by email or text, when all of the receipts come up. So that it was received, that you have a receipt number assigned, if there are any issues. So they will send you an email or text with that information if you include this form. So we highly recommend it. So you have all these documents. Take a copy of everything for your record. Your handout has the list of all of these documents. And then if you went to a school in the US before UChicago, more details about what you need to do are included on our website and on this handout. So take a copy of everything for your records. You're going to mail it to USCIS. If the address on your I-765 is in Illinois, you can use this PO box address. If it's outside of Illinois, check our website in the mailing section for a link to find out the exact address where it should be sent. So the service center you send it to depends on the address on the I-765, so make sure you're sending it to the correct address. Most of the time we see addresses in Illinois, which is why we've included this one. I shouldn't have to say this, but it happens a lot. Make sure you get like some kind of delivery confirmation. Take your package to the post office. This will need extra postage, not just a regular stamp. You know, take it to FedEx or UPS. This is very important, and you want to make sure it gets there when you want it to get there and that you get a receipt of the delivery. So keep that in mind as you're choosing your shipping method. So after you send in your application, it will go to a lockbox facility, and then it will be forwarded on to the actual processing center. So you may get a notification that your package was delivered and then not get a receipt notice for a couple weeks, and that's completely normal. So it will take a couple weeks after your package was delivered to receive your receipt notice. When you do, it will look like this. You'll receive it in the mail. If you filled out the G1145, you'll also get an electronic notification. At the top will be your receipt number. So this is the number you'll use in reference to your record. You can go to USCIS Case Status Online to check on the status of your application by using that receipt number. This is largely unsatisfying, but you still can do it. So it will say it's pending for 3 months, and then one day it will say it's approved. So this is helpful, though, to see if there are application issues. It will be updated to say, we've sent you a notice telling you how to proceed, here's what you need to do next. But if in most cases, in the overwhelming majority of cases, there are absolutely no issues. So this will just say, we received it on X date, it is pending, until it's approved. So 90 days later, you wait, and then receive the EAD. The EAD is the Employment Authorization Document. This is a physical plastic card that shows your OPT has been approved. On it will be your work authorization start and end dates. So you can legally begin work once you've received this card and the start date on this card has been reached. Even if your employer says it's okay, you cannot legally work before you have the card or before that date. Unemployment time starts counting on that date as well. So the clock sort of starts ticking on that start date. So if you have a job on that start date, great. Make sure you update us with your employer information. If you don't, the unemployment clock starts ticking on that start date. You are limited to those 90 days in between the start and end date. All right, notify our office if you have any application issues, if you need to change your address or the dates on your application, or you're not graduating as planned. In most of these cases, you'll have to work directly with USCIS, calling their customer service to try to resolve the issue, which I know is really fun. But they took away the mechanism that lets us help you, so sorry. So we can still give you guidance on how to do that or what to say, though. So if any issues with your application arise or your employer, let us know, and we'll try to assist as much as we can. Next, your responsibilities while on OPT. While on OPT, it's an extension of your F1 status. You are still sponsored by the university. You're still in F1 status, and you still have requirements for us. One of them is your reporting requirement. So you're required by law to report any changes in employment to our office within 10 days of that change. This includes getting a new employer, changing your work hours, changing your physical address, phone number, email. So any of those changes, we have an online form, an update form that you can access to submit these changes. Here's what it looks like, pretty standard data collection form. Make sure that you are submitting this update every time. Get a job, stop working, make this update. USCIS has recently started using SEVIS to automatically calculate the days of unemployment. So when you send us this form, we update SEVIS with the information saying you started on X date. If you never update us with this information, it will never get updated in SEVIS. And so USCIS will automatically terminate your F1 status and the remainder of your OPT on that 90th day of unemployment. So this is very important. Make sure that you're reporting to us all of your employment. Additionally, on this form, you'll also have to report how your work is related. So we've discussed that a little bit, but this is where you'll need to describe how your work is related. We get a lot of questions about travel while on OPT. So there are sort of really three portions of travel that have to do with OPT. The first is travel while your application is pending, and the second sort of after it's approved. So for travel, while your application is pending, it's completely fine to travel while your application is pending as long as it's before the end date on your I-20. So before that end date, you can travel like a regular F1 student. You need all the same documents, valid visa, valid travel signature, your I-20, all of that. Once that end date passes, we do not recommend that you travel while your OPT is pending because it tends to cause a lot of problems. We'll talk about that in a bit. So it's okay to travel while it's pending before your end date. So for example, if this week you're submitting your application and then you go out of the country for spring break, that's completely fine. It's just after your end date, travel issues arise. As I mentioned, all documentation about your application is going to the address on your I-765. It will not be sent abroad. So if you're out of the US and you get an RFE or some notification about your application, your signature was fuzzy and they need a new one, it's going to be hard to try to coordinate getting that to you and all of that good stuff. I've also seen a lot of times in the past, someone send it to their friend and then their friend try to send it to them in a different country, the EAD, to come back in. This can work completely fine, but we've also seen it where it just gets lost in the mail and everything sort of falls apart. So we do not recommend that you travel until your OPT has been approved and you have the card in your hand. So luckily, if you have summer travel plans and you're applying for OPT right now, you still have a lot of time to get that card before the summer's here, so hopefully you'd have it before those travel plans. Once your OPT is approved and you have the EAD, there are really no travel restrictions on your OPT travel. So the same as now. As you continue to be in F1 status, you'll continue to require all of the F1 travel documents, your I-20, and your travel signature. While on OPT, that travel signature is only valid for 6 months instead of 1 full year, so keep that in mind as you make travel plans. You'll need a valid F1 visa, as you do for every entry into the US. With that visa, OPT is a continuation of F1. It does make you eligible to apply for future F1 visas, so you can apply for an F1 visa while on OPT. And then in addition to your regular documents, you will also need your EAD and a letter from your employer, if you have one, stating, it's an offer letter. Essentially, it's just documentation showing that you have a reason to return to the US. The EAD at the bottom, it will say something like not valid for re-entry into the US or not valid for travel. It's supposed to say that. So what that means is that document alone is not sufficient proof of you being let back in the US. You need all of this, not just the EAD. If you're no longer in Chicago and you can't get a new travel signature, we can send one to you, so just be aware of that. It will take a little bit of time depending on the shipping method you choose, but we can send you a new I-20 with a new travel signature if you're not in Chicago anymore. For dependents, if you have F2 dependents, when we add the OPT to your record, it will also result in the creation of a new I-20 for your dependents, showing the extension for the allotted OPT time. If your dependents are traveling, they should have copies of all of their documents, and in addition to that, copies of all of your documents, including your EAD, including your employer letter, all of that good stuff. So copies of everything for dependent travel. Very briefly, so if you are a student in a STEM field, now this is a specific set of USCIS approved STEM majors in science, tech, engineering, and math, you are eligible for a 24-month extension of your OPT. There are several STEM programs at the University of Chicago. However, again, it's based on the degree for everybody's program. Things like biology, mathematics, statistics, biological sciences, all of those are STEM majors. On our website, we have more information about the STEM OPT extension, eligibility requirements for that, and how it all works. If you are STEM eligible and applying for that extension, you would do so about 3 months before your regular period of post-completion OPT expires. The last little piece we'll talk about is H-1B. For the vast majority of your H-1B guidance, you would need to get that from the employer who's willing to sponsor you for H-1B. What we're going to talk about is one very specific instance where OPT and H-1B overlap, and that is called the H-1B cap-gap extension. So how it works now is that most employers in the US are subject to an H-1B cap. That means there's a limited number of H-1B statuses available, and everybody has to apply for the status on a specific date, April 1. Because H-1B takes a long time to process, everybody who applies at that time all is given the exact same start date for H-1B, which is October 1. So there's a 6-month gap in between. However, if you're applying for OPT at the end of your academic calendar, which is often for people in June or July, your OPT will only go until June or July the following year. So there's typically a gap of 3 or 4 months in between the end of your OPT and the beginning of H-1B. So if you have an H-1B application for a change of status pending with an H-1B cap eligible employer, you will get an automatic extension of your OPT from your OPT end date to October 1st, if that makes sense. So your EAD will still show your June or July end date, but we'll print a new I-20 for you that shows you have this cap-gap benefit. Again, it's only for change of status petitions, and it's only for cap subject employers. So if your employer is not subject to the cap, this will not apply to you. Okay, so that's about all the information we have about H-1B and just about all the information we have about OPT. So I'm sure you have plenty of questions. Thank you very much for holding them till the end. So I will take any questions you have. Thank you very much.